Here's the rewritten continuation of the story, exactly 400 words, applying all requested name and location changes, with added tension and drama. Monica Harrington stepped into the grand lobby of the Crestview Royal Hotel in Madison, Wisconsin, her own luxurious property. At 48, Monica had long stopped expecting recognition based solely on her name or title. Tonight, after a grueling flight and with an early board meeting looming, she desired nothing more than quiet rest. Her tailored slacks, simple dusty blue silk blouse, and soft loafers were unassuming enough to blend seamlessly into the sea of guests. As she approached the front desk, a young receptionist named Jessica Reynolds, with bright acrylic nails rhythmically tapping on her keyboard, glanced up briefly and flashed a practiced smile, polite yet dismissive. Monica smiled back warmly. "Checking in under Harrington, Monica Harrington." Jessica paused, her manicured fingers hesitating over the keys, her lips tightening into a puzzled line. I'm sorry, I don't see any reservation under that name," she responded, eyes darting between Monica and the glowing screen. "That's all right," Monica replied calmly, her voice smooth and unflustered. "There's a suite always reserved specifically for me." Jessica's polite facade faltered slightly. She leaned forward, voice cooling just a bit, as if Monica hadn't quite understood. "Ma'am, we're actually at full capacity tonight. You'll need a confirmed booking to stay here. It's guests only." Monica didn't react visibly, though the weight in the air shifted unmistakably. She glanced past Jessica's shoulder at the gold plaque gleaming behind her. Crestview Royal, a Harrington property. The irony was bitter yet familiar. "I assure you I am a guest," Monica stated quietly, her tone unwavering. "More importantly, I'm the owner of this hotel." Jessica blinked twice, clearly caught off guard, then quickly masked her surprise with skepticism. "You own Crestview Royal?" Her voice dripped disbelief, eyes narrowing subtly. Monica simply nodded, her expression gentle but firm. Jessica reached hesitantly toward the phone. "I'll have to call the manager." "Go ahead," Monica encouraged calmly. The lobby grew tense, murmurs stirring from guests nearby. A middle-aged couple in golf polos paused mid-conversation, watching curiously. Near the fireplace, a man tilted his head. Interest piqued. Monica felt the uncomfortable familiarity of being scrutinized, judged silently yet openly doubted. Within moments, Kevin Chandler, the assistant manager, hurried toward them. His tie slightly crooked, his clipboard trembling faintly in his hands. Seeing Monica, his forced cheerfulness faltered instantly. "Good evening, is there some issue with your reservation?" Monica sighed inwardly, steeling herself. The battle was just beginning. From a discreet side door emerged Kevin Chandler, his assistant manager badge crooked and slightly smudged. He immediately sized up the tense scene unfolding in the elegant lobby of the Crestview Royal Hotel. His gaze met Monica's for only a second before he plastered a strained smile onto his face. "Good evening," Kevin greeted, his tone artificially cheerful yet laced with suspicion. "Is there a problem with your reservation, ma'am?" "She claims she owns the hotel," Jessica interjected loudly, her voice echoing across the marble floor and drawing the attention of nearby guests. An elderly couple sipping coffee paused, exchanging knowing glances. Kevin faltered slightly, clearly unsure how to proceed. Monica kept her composure, eyes fixed steadily on him. "I don't claim," Monica said softly but firmly. "My name is Monica Harrington. You'll find it on every quarterly report, every executive memo. I'm here for one night. There should be a suite held under the owner's block." Kevin adjusted his wire-frame glasses nervously, avoiding Monica's unwavering gaze. "Right, please give me one moment." He turned hastily, muttering anxiously into his walkie-talkie as he retreated behind the front desk. Monica stood utterly still, refusing to display even the slightest sign of discomfort. She didn't raise her voice or shift her stance, but the tension around her thickened perceptibly. At precisely that moment, hotel security quietly positioned themselves, one guard near the polished brass elevators, another subtly standing by the coffee bar. They didn't make an aggressive move, yet their presence communicated a clear message. Outwardly calm, Monica felt the familiar heat of frustration rising within her chest. This wasn't merely about not being recognized. It was about repeatedly being seen as an outsider in places she rightfully belonged. She had every credential she needed: identification, emails, ownership documents, even photographs from the hotel's grand opening 7 years earlier. But instead of presenting these, Monica quietly stepped back, took out her smartphone, and made a single, decisive call. The conversation lasted precisely 26 seconds. Without anger or urgency, she simply stated, "I've been denied access to my own property at Crestview Royal Hotel in Madison. Resolve this immediately." Kevin returned moments later, a thick folder trembling in his hands, visibly shaken. "Ms. Harrington," he began, emphasizing her surname carefully this time, "there must have been a misunderstanding." "You can verify whatever you wish," Monica interrupted gently yet powerfully. "I'm not moving." The hotel staff stood frozen, locked in an uneasy standoff, uncertain whether to escalate or apologize. Neither choice seemed safe. Monica noticed guests subtly reacting. 3 elderly women seated near the window whispered discreetly behind cupped hands. A young businessman held his laptop half open, pretending disinterest while clearly absorbing every detail. Even the usually jovial doorman had stopped greeting new arrivals, frozen mid-motion at the lobby's entrance. Then Monica saw it clearly. The receptionist, Jessica Reynolds, discreetly sliding her phone beneath the counter, hurriedly scrolling. Monica didn't need to guess what Jessica was doing. She was undoubtedly Googling Monica's name, desperately hoping to validate or disprove her claim. It would have almost been amusing if the scenario weren't painfully familiar. It always unfolded in this predictable manner. People believed they knew precisely what authority looked like, how true leadership spoke, and how genuine ownership dressed. Monica, with her brown skin, neatly styled textured hair, no designer handbag, no flashy jewelry, didn't match their mental image. That's what hurt most. Not the denial itself, but the unsurprising regularity of such moments. In a distant flashback, Monica recalled another hotel lobby nearly 20 years earlier in Milwaukee. At 28, freshly appointed vice president, she had stood nervously in heels that blistered her feet in an oversized suit, painfully aware it was the best she could afford. Security personnel had watched her every move suspiciously, following her discreetly from the instant she entered. Only when the CFO personally greeted her had their suspicion turned to embarrassment. She had never forgotten that sting of being undervalued. And now, 2 decades later, despite having her name etched on ownership documents, the painful cycle repeated itself. Monica exhaled quietly, scanning the lobby again. Still no apology, still no clarification, just ticking time and lingering stares. Then the elevator chimed, breaking the heavy silence. 2 men emerged briskly, one in a sharp gray business suit clutching a clipboard, the other dressed in a company-branded fleece vest. Neither resembled typical hotel staff. Both carried authority unmistakably. Monica instantly recognized Regional Vice President Robert Grayson and District Manager Eric Bennett. Upon spotting her, panic flashed momentarily across their faces. Robert hurried forward, barely nodding toward Kevin Chandler, speaking directly to Monica. "Ms. Harrington, we sincerely apologize. We just received your call." Eric, breathless and anxious, quickly interjected. "Suite 1202 is prepared, your driver is rescheduled, and your regular fruit tray and espresso will be ready immediately." Monica allowed herself only the smallest, composed smile. "Thank you," Monica Harrington said, her voice calm, but she wasn't done watching. She needed to see it, the way power shifted a room once everyone finally knew who she was. Monica wanted to witness if their tone softened, if their posture straightened, if respect suddenly became effortless, now that they realized they had misjudged the very woman whose name was etched into the marble plaque behind them. Because it was one thing to be disrespected when they didn't know your name, but it was something else entirely when they did and chose to do it anyway. Eric Bennett pulled Kevin Chandler aside, his voice low and sharp, reprimanding through clenched teeth. Meanwhile, Robert Grayson was already on his phone, voice clipped, uttering words like HR protocol and service misconduct. The tension that had once suffocated Monica now ricocheted inward, bouncing around the staff like a pinball of panic. But Monica didn't gloat. She didn't cross her arms or tilt her chin in triumph. Instead, she walked slowly, deliberately back to the front desk. Her heels clicked softly on the polished tile as she placed her phone gently on the counter. "I'll take the 12th floor suite," Monica said evenly, her voice controlled. "Same setup, and please send someone up to confirm it's clean." Jessica Reynolds opened her mouth, but no words came out. She stood frozen, eyes wide, acrylic nails now tapping nervously against the granite counter. The confident rhythm from earlier was gone, replaced by an anxious, uneven beat. Monica turned toward Robert. "Have I been checked in?" Robert nodded quickly, flipping his clipboard. "Yes, ma'am. 2 key cards and a full incident report will be ready before you reach the elevator." "Good. And the rest?" Monica asked without breaking eye contact. "We've issued a site-wide notification," Robert confirmed. "The corporate audit team is on standby. All current staff will undergo recertification on guest protocols. Disciplinary action begins tonight." Monica's gaze flicked toward Jessica, who bit the inside of her cheek, visibly shaken. "You'll speak to her," Monica said flatly. "Yes, ma'am," Robert cleared his throat. "Privately, HR will be present." "I'll speak to her too," Monica added. "Not now, after I've rested." She took the key cards, nodded once, and walked toward the elevator. The lobby fell silent. Guests whispered, some stared, but none dared approach. As the elevator doors slid closed, Monica caught one last glimpse of Kevin, rigid, sweating. Her suite on the 12th floor smelled of lemon and eucalyptus. The fruit tray was waiting. Espresso pods stacked neatly. Everything perfect. A handwritten card with her initials, MH, rested neatly on the polished table, though Monica Harrington could tell it had been rushed. She walked the suite slowly, not just inspecting for cleanliness, but searching for attitude, for intention, proof that somewhere within these walls, someone still cared about the experience she had once built with her own bare hands. This wasn't just another hotel suite. This place carried her story. Monica's mind drifted back to being 33, standing nervously in a bank office in Minnesota, pitching her vision to a table full of skeptical men who barely looked up from their papers. The loan terms had been brutal, designed to make her fail. They practically dared her to try, and she did. Now, nearly 2 decades later, standing in one of her signature penthouse suites, Monica felt the same weight, still having to prove herself in a building that wouldn't exist without her. Her phone buzzed sharply, pulling her back. A message from her assistant flashed across the screen. "Everything's in motion. Let me know if you want a media statement." Monica stared at the message. One tweet, one interview. This could explode overnight. But that wasn't what this moment was about. It wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was respect. And how dangerously often respect was tied to assumptions, not reality. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded, silent. Outside, the city pulsed faintly. Traffic hummed along East Washington Avenue. Somewhere, the distant horn of a freight train echoed from the industrial yards. But inside the suite, the air stayed heavy. A knock at the door broke the stillness. "Room service." A young man wheeled in a fresh espresso, a written apology from the kitchen manager, and a complimentary offer. A massage therapist on call for the evening. Monica thanked him softly, closing the door behind him. She sat again, took a slow sip of the rich espresso, eyes drifting toward the window where the city lights flickered against the night sky. She felt it, a shift, not just in the hotel, but in herself. At exactly 6:30 a.m., Monica Harrington descended the elevator, not as a guest, but as the CEO. Her charcoal suit was sharp, ivory blouse crisp, heels echoing power with every step. The lobby stirred as early checkouts lined up, coffee cups in hand, conversation stalling as Monica appeared. Even the barista froze mid-pour. Near the fireplace, Robert Grayson and Eric Bennett waited, 3 folders untouched, 2 coffees cold. They looked like men who hadn't slept. Monica Harrington moved with quiet authority, heading straight for the small executive conference room tucked behind the concierge desk. Robert Grayson followed closely, with Eric Bennett falling into step behind him. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Seated stiffly at the polished oak table were Kevin Chandler, his face pale, and Jessica Reynolds, her name tag glinting under the overhead light. A woman from corporate HR, who introduced herself only as Marta, sat poised with a notepad already open, pen in hand. Monica didn't sit. She stood tall at the head of the table, arms folded, commanding the space. Silence hung heavy, thick enough to choke on. Finally, Monica spoke, her voice quiet but razor sharp. "Would someone like to explain what happened last night, from your perspective?" Jessica stared down at her lap, fingers twisting nervously. Kevin cleared his throat but seemed unable to form words. The weight of Monica's steady gaze pressed hard until Jessica finally mumbled, I just didn't think she was… I mean, I didn't expect… You didn't expect someone like me to own this building, Monica finished for her, voice calm and controlled. Jessica nodded weakly, shame coloring her cheeks. Monica's tone remained measured. Was I rude to you? Jessica shook her head quickly. No, ma'am. Did I raise my voice? No. Did I threaten anyone? Monica asked again, eyes never leaving Jessica. Jessica's voice was barely audible. No. Monica took a slow, steady breath and shifted her gaze toward Marta. I don't need this to be a firing squad, she said firmly, but I do need accountability. Marta nodded, scribbling something down. Eric spoke next, clearing his throat. We're prepared to issue a formal write-up and remove Jessica from front desk rotation until she completes recertification. Kevin will be placed on administrative review pending further interviews. Monica nodded once, finally sitting down. She turned back to Jessica. How long have you worked here? 4 months, Jessica whispered. In that time, have you ever stopped to think about who built this hotel, where it came from? Monica pressed. Jessica stammered. I guess I just assumed it was some corporation, a group of investors or something. Monica let the words hang in the air. Do you know how many properties I've built across this country? Jessica shook her head. 17, from Baltimore to Phoenix, everyone designed with intention, luxury made accessible, service made human. I built this brand because I got tired of being treated like a shadow. Her voice softened, but the weight was unmistakable. So why, when I walk into my own lobby, am I still invisible to the people working under my name? A full reset, no exceptions, Eric Bennett confirmed, his voice steady but strained. Monica Harrington nodded slowly, fixing him with a firm gaze. Make sure it's not just another box you check. I don't want memorized scripts. I want people here to understand what respect looks like, especially when they think no one's watching. Robert Grayson finally spoke, his voice quieter. We'll make it real. Monica stood. The meeting was over. As she walked out of the conference room, the lobby seemed to straighten itself, as if the building itself felt her presence. Staff scrambled, some nodding nervously, others avoiding eye contact. Monica didn't acknowledge any of them. Not yet. She wasn't interested in their performance. She was looking for change. But before she left, there was still one conversation Monica needed to have, and it had nothing to do with policies or protocols. She waited. Monica gave it time, not for dramatic effect, but because she wanted it quiet. No phones ringing, no fake smiles as guests shuffled through, just stillness and truth. Finally, she saw Jessica Reynolds sitting alone in the staff lounge behind the coffee bar, hunched over a narrow table, a half-eaten blueberry muffin forgotten in front of her. Her phone lay face down. She looked like she hadn't slept. Monica didn't send anyone. She walked in herself. Jessica jumped, nearly knocking over her drink. Relax, Monica said softly, pulling out the chair across from her. I just want to talk. Jessica swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Drop the ma'am, Monica replied gently. This isn't a hearing. Jessica nodded quickly, staring at her lap. They sat quietly, the hum of the fridge and soft buzz of overhead lights filling the space. Monica finally spoke. Have you ever worked somewhere where you felt small? Jessica blinked, surprised by the question, then nodded. Yeah, most of the time, honestly. Tell me, Monica encouraged. Jessica hesitated but sighed. I worked at a diner off I-90. Wore this stupid paper hat. Cooks yelled at me. Some customers didn't tip. Most days I felt invisible. Monica leaned back. So you know what that feels like, to be ignored. Jessica nodded, voice small. Yeah. Then help me understand. Monica's voice stayed even. How you looked me in the eye last night and decided I didn't belong here. Jessica's throat tightened. I don't know. I didn't mean to. When you walked in, I thought, maybe you were lost or waiting on someone. You didn't look like… She stopped. Didn't look like what? Monica asked quietly. Jessica's eyes filled. Like someone who owns places like this. Like the kind of person who owns hotels, Jessica finally whispered, ashamed. Monica Harrington didn't flinch. Her voice remained calm. And what does that kind of person look like? Jessica's lips parted, but no sound came out. Monica nodded slowly. That's the real problem. People have this picture in their heads. Clean cut, probably male, probably older. Definitely not me. She leaned in just slightly. And that picture, it doesn't just live in your head, Jessica. It affects decisions. It shapes behavior. I'm sorry, Jessica whispered, her voice cracking. I really am. I know that's not enough, but I am. Monica nodded once, measured. It's a start, but I didn't come here for an apology. Her gaze softened just a bit. I came here because I need you to see me, not just as your boss, not as some cautionary tale, but as a person. Jessica looked up, confused, vulnerable. I was you once, Monica continued, her voice steadier now. I started as a receptionist. More times than I can count, people mistook me for the janitor, called me sweetheart, honey, like I wasn't the one keeping the whole place running. She paused, letting the words sink in. Every single time, I had to choose. Do I fight or let it go? And when I finally made it into the boardroom, I promised myself, one day I'd build places where people like you could grow. Jessica's eyes widened in disbelief. You really started as a receptionist? Monica smiled faintly. In St. Paul, my first boss told me I sounded too educated to be on the phones. Moved me to night audit instead. That's where it began. Jessica let out a nervous laugh. That's unreal. It shouldn't be, Monica replied gently. It should be normal. She stood slowly, her presence still commanding, but less heavy now. I don't need you to be perfect, but I do need you to be aware. Every guest who walks through that door, old, young, dressed up or not, deserves dignity. Start there, and you'll never have to recover from a night like last night again. Jessica stood too, voice trembling. Thank you for talking to me. I mean that. Monica nodded once and turned away, leaving Jessica standing there, small but somehow bigger. And as Monica walked out of the staff lounge, something inside her eased. The message had finally landed, right where it needed to. Personnel files sat stacked neatly on the desk, each flagged for review. Monica Harrington wasn't angry, she was exact. Her voice carried no malice as she scanned one report aloud. I'm not here to punish, I'm here to prevent repetition. Eric Bennett glanced up from his laptop. We're adjusting our interview process for front desk hires. Not just testing for skill, there'll be empathy, pattern testing, bias evaluation, real vetting. Good, Monica nodded, tapping her pen once against the polished wood. And put me on the rotation. Starting next quarter, I'll show up at random properties. Quietly. Just like I did here. Robert Grayson raised an eyebrow. You want to be what? A secret guest? Not secret, Monica corrected. Anonymous. Until I'm not. A slow grin crept across Eric's face. That's going to make a lot of people nervous. Good, Monica said flatly. Let them sit in it. The real version of this job doesn't come with warnings. She stood, gathering the papers and slipping them neatly into a leather folder. Have the new training live by next Friday. Include story modules. I want staff reading real experiences from guests, not corporate scripts, real words, human ones. Robert gave a crisp nod. Consider it done. With that, Monica left the office and made her way back through the lobby. She stopped briefly near the reception desk, where a new agent stood confidently. He smiled immediately, respectful, no pretense, like someone who understood she wasn't just another executive passing by. Monica returned the nod, glancing around. On the surface, everything looked normal. Guests wheeling bags, coffee cups clinking, but she felt it. The shift. Small cracks forming in old habits. And that's how real change begins. Not with press releases or public apologies, but with quiet corrections, repeated until they stick. She rode the elevator back to the 12th floor. The doors opened softly, heels silent on the plush carpet. The faint scent of fresh linens and lemon greeted her. Her suite door was ajar. Housekeeping must have just finished. Her bag sat neatly zipped, laptop resting on the desk, charger wrapped tight. Everything in perfect order, except one thing. A folded note sat on the nightstand. She opened it. Miss Harrington, thank you for your grace. I'll be better. Jessica, it wasn't fancy, no envelope, just a simple notepad paper, careful handwriting. but it meant more than any polished corporate apology ever could. Monica folded it gently and slipped it into her purse. Downstairs, her car waited. The same doorman from the night before opened the door with purpose. "Safe travels, Miss Harrington," he said warmly. "We hope to see you again soon, Miss Harrington," the doorman said warmly, his voice steady with genuine respect. Monica smiled faintly. "You will." As the black car pulled away from the curb, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. She'd left something behind, something heavier than her neatly packed luggage. She'd left the weight of being misjudged, the quiet ache of having to explain her worth in a place built by her own hands. And in its place, Monica carried something else: understanding, discomfort, maybe even growth. For them, and perhaps a little for herself. But there was still one last thing she needed to say. Not to the hotel, not to the staff. This message was meant for anyone who had ever stood in a room and had to prove they belonged. The ride toward Dane County Regional Airport was silent. No small talk from the driver, no music playing from the speakers, just the soft hum of tires on pavement and the occasional blink of a turn signal. Monica sat in the back seat, one hand resting on her leather purse, the other gently holding the folded note from Jessica. She hadn't read it again, but she didn't need to. It was there, a quiet reminder, a small piece of proof that the last 24 hours hadn't been for nothing. Her eyes drifted to the window, watching the familiar landscape roll past. Rows of aging brick buildings, old gas stations on corner lots, weathered signs for auto shops and family bakeries. This wasn't where she'd meant to be this week. Yet maybe she'd been meant to be here all along. Not for the board meeting, not for the business, but for the conversation. The truth was, it didn't shock her anymore. Monica wasn't angry, she was just tired. Tired of how often worth gets measured by assumptions. Tired of how fast people sort you into categories without asking a single question. Tired of explaining things she should never have to say aloud. Yes, this is mine. Yes, I built it. Yes, I deserve to be here. And yet, she wasn't bitter. That's what most people never understood. Monica didn't carry bitterness. She carried memory, and if used right, memory was powerful. As the airport signs came into view, Monica thought of her younger self working night shifts, wearing cheap uniforms, no recognition, just raw determination. She'd built everything they now question. But when the world refuses to see you, you make sure you see yourself, clearly, unapologetically. And then you walk in anyway. You hold your ground. You speak plainly. You don't beg for permission. You act like the door was always yours. Monica Harrington stepped out of the car in front of Dane County Regional Airport, grabbed her bag, and nodded once at the driver. There were no more words needed. Her work here was done. Inside the terminal, people rushed past her with coffee cups in hand and roller bags trailing behind them. The overhead speakers crackled with flight announcements, calling boarding groups by number and gate changes without pause. Monica moved quietly through it all, almost invisible again in the swirl of strangers. But inside her chest, something finally settled. She had taken a moment designed to humiliate her and turned it into a mirror, forcing every person in that hotel to finally see themselves for who they were. And that's the thing about mirrors. They don't lie. They show you exactly who you really are. Monica hoped Jessica would grow from it. She hoped Kevin had learned his lesson. She hoped Eric Bennett and Robert Grayson would follow through on every promise they made in that office, ensuring this never happened to another guest, especially not one who looked like her. But truthfully, even if they didn't, Monica knew she'd still be standing. She always had been, because dignity, real dignity, isn't something anyone gives you. It's something you refuse to give up, no matter how many times the world tries to strip it away. And for anyone watching, for anyone who's ever been dismissed, doubted, or spoken to like they didn't matter, Monica Harrington had one final truth to leave behind. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to break down to prove your worth. You just have to know who you are and walk like it every single time. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them stare. Let them sit with their own assumptions and wonder how they missed it. And when they finally see you, really see you, make sure it's a moment they never forget. Monica reached the security checkpoint, glanced once more at the terminal bustling around her, and then moved forward. Her posture strong, her head held high. She didn't need anyone's validation. Not anymore. She'd earned her place in every room she walked into, whether they liked it or not. And as the sun broke over the horizon outside those airport windows, Monica felt lighter. Not because the world had changed, but because she had reminded herself that she was never waiting for the world's permission. If this story made you pause, if it made you reflect, if it stirred something deep in your chest, share it, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about truth, power, and the people who refuse to be ignored. The lesson in Monica Harrington's story is one that resonates far beyond the polished floors of a luxury hotel. It is about dignity, perception, and the quiet power of knowing your worth even when the world tries to deny it. We live in a society that still measures value by appearances, skin color, gender, age, and the clothes someone wears. Too often people assume leadership, success, or ownership must come wrapped in a certain package. Clean-cut, male, white, middle-aged, dressed in designer suits. And when someone like Monica, a black woman in her 40s, dressed simply, walking alone, steps into a space like that, people don't see power. They see a problem. They see someone who doesn't fit the image in their mind, and that's where the damage begins. This story is a reminder that those assumptions, whether silent or spoken, carry weight, shaping the way people treat others, often without realizing the harm. But Monica didn't fight back with shouting or outrage. She didn't scream to be recognized. She simply stood her ground, calm and unapologetic, and forced the room to adjust around her. That is the power of self-awareness and quiet confidence. The truth is, dignity isn't something anyone gives you. It's something you carry, something you protect, and something you refuse to surrender, no matter how many times you are asked to prove yourself. Monica's choice not to escalate, not to make it a viral moment, but instead to turn it into a teaching moment, says everything about the kind of leader she is. She wasn't interested in humiliating the people who wronged her. What she wanted, what she demanded, was change. Real change. The kind that forces people to examine their own bias, to think twice the next time they look at someone and decide who they are based on nothing but a glance. She taught a powerful lesson that respect shouldn't have to be earned through proving ownership or power. It should be given because every person who walks through the door is worthy of it. Monica reminded us that the real work of change doesn't happen in press releases or grand gestures. It happens in quiet corrections, in uncomfortable conversations, in making people sit with what they did and why it matters. And for anyone who's ever been doubted, dismissed, or overlooked, Monica's story is a testament. You don't have to beg for a seat at the table. You don't have to explain your presence. You walk in like the door was always yours, because it is. And in doing so, you make sure they never forget it.